Let's go.
King Solomon is often remembered for his massive wealth and a long list of diplomatic alliances, but his most prestigious move was a marriage to the daughter of the Pharaoh of Egypt, a union that ignored centuries of established royal custom. This marriage presents a double historical anomaly. The Bible records the event while leaving the Pharaoh's name out entirely, and the Egyptian royal records contain no mention of the wedding at all. This silence isn't accidental. Egyptian pharaohs operated under a rigid policy that strictly forbade giving royal daughters to foreign kings. Sending a princess abroad was effectively an admission of secondary status. Because of that taboo, the absence of this marriage on the Egyptian stone monuments suggests that the ruler involved was attempting to keep a difficult diplomatic reality off the official record. To identify this pharaoh, we can use the text of 1 Kings to construct a suspect profile based on 4 specific historical constraints. First is the timeline. Solomon's reign is typically dated between 970 and 931 BC. Since the marriage happened early in his reign, our suspect must be ruling Egypt between 970 and 960 BC. Second and third are the military campaign and the dowry. The suspect must have campaigned in the Levant to capture and burn the city of Gezer, specifically to hand the territory to Solomon as a gift for his daughter. Finally, there is the factor of political instability. For a pharaoh to break the marriage taboo and send a princess to Jerusalem, he must have been ruling from a position of domestic or military vulnerability. These 4 criteria, the date, the specific military target, the dowry, and a climate of political weakness, allow us to audit the pharaohs of the 10th century. In the 10th century BC, Egypt was a shadow of its former self. The great new kingdom had collapsed, and the 21st dynasty now ruled a fractured country from Tanis, a city located in the swampy Nile Delta. Tanis was literally a city of recycled parts. The pharaohs here lacked the wealth of their ancestors, so they dismantled the monuments of older empires and hauled the stones to the delta to build their own capital. Within this scavenged city, we find our primary suspect, Pharaoh Siamun. He reigned from 986 to 967 BC, which places him exactly at the start of Solomon's time on the throne. Siamun also faced the necessary political pressure. His dynasty controlled only Lower Egypt, while powerful high priests ruled the south, making an alliance with the rising Israelite kingdom a strategic necessity. While Siamun matches the dates and the motive, the physical evidence of a Levant campaign is what connects him to the city of Gezer. The first piece of physical evidence was found at Tanis, a triumphal relief showing Pharaoh Siamun in the middle of a battle. In the carving, Siamun is smiting an enemy wielding a Philistine-style double axe. This iconographic detail evinces his campaign on the Israelite border, right where the city of Gezer sat on the frontier. At Gezer itself, excavations uncovered a violent 10th century destruction layer. The city was burned, then immediately rebuilt. Inside that ash, archaeologists discovered a bronze sphinx bearing Pharaoh Siamun's name. The convergence of the battle relief, the burn layer at Gezer, and a physical object bearing the pharaoh's name fulfills every requirement of our suspect profile. While Siamun is the near-certain historical candidate, the question remains, why did the Egyptian court scrub this alliance from their history? The answer lies in the embarrassment of the transaction. For Egypt, admitting they gave a royal daughter to Jerusalem was a public acknowledgement of their own decline, so no record was ever carved into the temple walls. There was also a cynical double game at play. While Siamun was sending Solomon a bride, his court was simultaneously sheltering Solomon's enemies, including Hadad of Edom and Jeroboam. This reflects a classic buffer state strategy, stabilizing a strong neighbor with a wedding, while secretly maintaining his rivals as political leverage for the future. This alliance was a calculated effort to manage the borders of a shrinking empire by binding one neighbor with a bride, while quietly preparing his replacement. The strategy only lasted as long as Siamun lived. Shortly after his death, the 21st dynasty collapsed and was replaced by a more aggressive ruler, Pharaoh Shishak. Shishak abandoned the diplomatic pretense. Just 5 years after Solomon's death, he launched a full-scale military invasion of Israel. This campaign is the moment where the records finally align. Shishak's invasion is recorded on the walls of the Karnak temple and in the biblical text as a single shared historical event. Recovering the missing name of Siamun clarifies the tactical maneuvers used to maintain power in the Near East and shows how a single diplomatic marriage was part of a larger struggle for survival between two ancient neighbors.
Welcome to the deep dive. Imagine discovering that a world-famous ancient peace treaty was actually, just a cover-up for a massive intelligence operation.
Oh, yeah.
Because today we are leaping headfirst into a landscape that feels, honestly, less like ancient history and a lot more like a modern, high-stakes geopolitical thriller.
It really does. I mean, when you step back and look at the actual pieces on the board, the fragmented records of ancient Egypt, they leave behind this remarkably clear trail of statecraft and strategy. Well, provided you know where to look.
Right, and finding that trail is exactly our mission for you today. We are taking the stack of incredible sources, so archaeological field reports, biblical texts, epigraphic data.
Which is really just a fancy way of saying ancient inscriptions carved into stone.
Exactly, and we're going to decode a royal cold case. We're tracking down the true identity of an unnamed pharaoh who married his daughter off to King Solomon.
A huge deal at the time.
Right. And we are going to unpack how Egypt engineered a devastating foreign coup and finally reveal the hidden physical identity of the city where the Exodus showdown actually took place.
So, okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the cold case itself, right?
Yeah, we do.
The biblical book of 1 Kings mentions a pharaoh, but entirely leaves his name out.
Which is just the ultimate historical puzzle. Because before we can understand Egypt's overarching strategy, we have to identify the player.
Right. Who is this guy?
Exactly. The text tells us that early in King Solomon's reign, a pharaoh of Egypt went up, conquered the Canaanite city of Gezer, burned it to the ground, and then, just gave the smoldering real estate to Solomon.
As a dowry.
Yeah.
Like, along with his daughter's hand in marriage.
Right. Which sets up some very strict constraints for us to work with.
Yeah, because based on the biblical chronologies, we know this marriage happened early in Solomon's reign.
Yeah.
So that places it roughly around, 970 to 960 BC?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And to put that into an Egyptian context, that timeline points squarely to the end of the 21st dynasty.
Now, for a long time, figuring out which pharaoh this was felt basically impossible. Because the 21st dynasty is notoriously underdocumented. I mean, they didn't leave behind the massive pristine monuments of earlier eras.
They were kind of in a slump?
Exactly. But then enter French archaeologist Pierre Montet.
Oh, his story alone is so cinematic. I mean, it's 1940, right? The world is literally plunging into the chaos of World War II.
Yeah, Europe is fully mobilized for war.
And Montet is standing in the mud of the Egyptian Delta at this site called Tanis, literally chipping his way through a solid granite plug to find a tomb.
While everyone else is fighting a modern war, he is peering into the intact silver and gold sarcophagi of the 21st dynasty. He discovers the royal necropolis at Tanis.
Wow.
And based on the timeline of the kings buried there, scholars, notably Kenneth Kitchen, were able to identify our primary suspect for this biblical event, Pharaoh Siamun.
Siamun. Okay, so we have a suspect, and we have a chronological overlap. But, an overlap isn't a conviction. We need physical evidence tying him to a military campaign up in the Levant.
And the evidence converges brilliantly from a few different directions here. First, there is a broken bas-relief found at the Temple of Amun in Tanis.
And for those visualizing this at home, a bas-relief is a sculpture carved out of a flat stone wall, so the figures sort of project slightly outward.
Right. And this particular carving depicts Pharaoh Siamun in a classic smiting pose, raising a weapon to strike a captive enemy.
No, wait. Pharaohs love depicting themselves smiting people, right? It was standard royal propaganda. So what makes this specific carving the smoking gun?
Well, you have to look closely at what the captive enemy is holding. It's a distinct double-bladed crescent axe.
Oh, which, according to the military historians in our sources, is definitively not an Egyptian weapon.
Nope. Nor is it Canaanite. It's a Philistine weapon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the Philistines occupied the coastal region right next to Gezer. So this broken relief is the only piece of evidence showing Levantine military contact for any pharaoh in that entire dynasty.
So it places Siamun's military campaign exactly on the Philistine-Israelite frontier, right where Gezer sits.
Exactly.
So that puts Siamun in the neighborhood, essentially, holding the weapon. But to actually pin the conquest of Gezer on him, We need physical proof at the crime scene. Unless he, dropped his royal seal in the ashes of the city, how do we definitively connect him to the destruction mentioned in the text?
Well, he essentially did leave his royal seal.
Wait, really?
Yeah. When excavators dug into the mound of Gezer, they hit an early 10th century destruction layer.
And when an archaeologist says destruction layer, they mean they hit a literal line in the earth packed with ash, crushed pottery, charred wooden beams. Basically a frozen snapshot of a violently burned city.
Right. And right there, mixed into those 10th century ruins, archaeologists uncovered a 4-inch bronze Sphinx explicitly inscribed with the words, Siamun, beloved of the moon.
That is wild. You have the burned city layer matching the timeline, the relief of him fighting the immediate neighbors, and a bronze Sphinx with his name on it right in the rubble.
It's an incredibly compelling case.
It really is. But I have to push back here for a second because while the military conquest makes total sense, I am genuinely baffled by the marriage itself. Wait, didn't Egyptian pharaohs historically flat out refuse to give their daughters to foreign kings?
Oh, completely. They viewed it as entirely beneath them. It was this ironclad diplomatic rule for centuries.
I mean, I'm looking at a quote in our sources right now from an earlier pharaoh, Amenhotep III. The king of Babylon writes to him asking for an Egyptian princess, and Amenhotep flat out tells him, from of old, a daughter of the king of Egypt has not been given to anyone.
Yep.
Not to anyone.
So if Egypt is so fiercely protective of its royal bloodline, why on earth would Siamun break centuries of protocol to give his daughter to Solomon?
What's fascinating here is that giving away a daughter, which in the modern world we might view as a gesture of deep affection or an equal partnership, was, in the ancient Near East, a glaring sign of desperate geopolitical weakness.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Siamun breaking this rule wasn't some grand romantic gesture. It was a masterstroke of buffer state management born out of sheer panic.
Okay, put that panic into context for us. Why was the ruler of Egypt sweating so much?
Because during the 21st dynasty, Egypt was a shadow of its former New Kingdom glory. The country was completely fractured. Siamun and his dynasty only ruled the northern part of the country from the northeastern Delta, specifically from that city of Tanis.
Right.
Meanwhile, the southern part of Egypt, down in Thebes, was ruled by powerful high priests. So picture Siamun sitting in the north, looking northeast across the Sinai Desert toward the Levant.
And what he sees is absolutely terrifying. He sees David and Solomon having built a massive, unified, rising superpower right on his doorstep.
Exactly. Controlling the highlands and the trade routes.
Yeah.
Put yourself in Siamun's sandals for a second. He knows he couldn't possibly win an all-out war against the united Israelite monarchy. His fractured country simply didn't have the military resources or the economic engine for a prolonged conflict.
So, striking the Canaanite buffer city of Gezer and then immediately handing it over to Solomon as a dowry was a brilliant face-saving move.
Right. It's the ultimate defensive play. You turn a looming military threat into family.
And beyond just survival, this elite peace treaty secured Egypt's immediate northeastern border.
Yes. It put Solomon in their debt, and crucially, it safely opened up highly lucrative trade routes that Egypt desperately needed.
The logistics of that trade network are just wild to think about. I mean, the sources mention that Solomon essentially became a middleman, a massive regional broker.
Oh, absolutely.
He was importing Egyptian chariots from the south and horses from Ku, which is way up north in modern-day Turkey, and selling them across the region to the Hittites and Arameans.
And you do not broker the Pharaoh's premium chariots without the Pharaoh's enthusiastic consent.
Exactly. This marriage wasn't just a wedding. It was the ink on a massive regional free trade agreement.
Yeah, from Siamun's perspective, he traded a daughter and a border town he couldn't afford to garrison anyway in exchange for border security and a booming economy. It was pure, unadulterated, realpolitik.
So Siamun successfully buys his peace, but that exposes a massive flaw in ancient diplomacy, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, treaties are really just pieces of papyrus the moment a king dies. How does Egypt handle Israel when a new, much more aggressive pharaoh takes the throne, and the marriage alliance means absolutely nothing to him?
Ah, right. That brings us to phase 2 of Egypt's strategy. Siamun's 21st dynasty eventually collapses, and a new pharaoh takes the throne. Shishak I, also known as Shishak.
Oh, okay.
He is of Libyan descent. He founds the 22nd dynasty, and his primary goal is to restore Egyptian dominance over the Levant. The previous dynasty's marriage alliance is completely irrelevant to him.
But Solomon's empire is still at its peak, right? Shishak can't just march an army up the mountains to Jerusalem. That would be a devastatingly expensive and risky war.
Exactly. So instead of a frontal assault, he plays a brilliant long game. He weaponizes a rebel.
Oh, enter Jeroboam.
Yes.
Jeroboam was one of Solomon's chief labor supervisors. So, a man with deep administrative knowledge and a serious grudge. He leads a rebellion against Solomon. The rebellion fails, and he is forced to flee for his life.
And where does the fleeing rebel go? Straight across the desert into Egypt.
Now, Shishak doesn't just throw him in a dungeon or hand him back to Solomon. The text says Shishak welcomes him into the Delta near Tanis and nourishes him.
Right.
How do you nourish a foreign dissident? You don't just give him a guest room. You fund his entourage. You provide him with military advisors. You let him study your statecraft. I mean, if we think about this in terms of modern espionage, this is exactly like a hostile government harboring a sleeper agent.
It is entirely state-sponsored proxy warfare. Shishak keeps Jeroboam safe as a coup in waiting. This is often referred to by historians as the bread plot.
The bread plot.
Yeah. Shishak knows the Israelite United Monarchy is actually quite fragile. It's held together largely by Solomon's immense force of will and, frankly, heavy taxation. Shishak just has to wait.
And the moment Solomon dies, Shishak activates his asset. Jeroboam returns to Israel, and almost immediately the kingdom violently splits into two warring factions, Israel in the north, Judah in the south.
It's breathtaking strategy, really. Shishak shatters his biggest regional rival without deploying a single Egyptian soldier. He just let Jeroboam do the heavy lifting for him.
Wow. And then he reaps the rewards. Because just 5 years after Solomon's death, with the Levant completely exhausted by the civil war, Shishak finally marches out of Egypt.
He sweeps through the region, plundering a weakened Jerusalem and dozens of other cities without ever facing a massive unified army.
And we know he did this because he couldn't stop bragging about it.
He was incredibly proud of it. He carved the victory of this campaign onto the Bubastite portal at Karnak, which is this massive monumental stone gateway at the Karnak temple complex. He lifted all the cities he conquered.
He brought the receipts.
He really did. And furthermore, a portion of his victory stela was actually found on Israelite soil at Megiddo.
And for those who might not know, a stela is basically a massive stone billboard that ancient kings used to publicly declare their dominance over a conquered area.
Exactly. So finding that stela at Megiddo is the ultimate proof that his campaign was a resounding physical success.
So let's just trace this incredible arc for a second. Egypt starts by giving away a princess to buy peace and build a trade network. A generation later, they use that exact same Delta region to house a sleeper agent, shatter that allied kingdom, and plunder the wealth they helped build.
It's a masterclass in shifting tactics.
It really is. But here's where the story takes a turn that honestly gave me chills when I was reading through the sources. All of these massive geopolitical chess moves, the marriage, the harboring of Jeroboam, they happen in one specific Egyptian city, Tanis.
Yep.
But wait, if Tanis is the stage for this, that triggers a massive bell in my head, because Tanis has a hidden identity that ties it back to the most famous story in the entire Hebrew Bible.
It does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the history of Tanis itself is a physical record of the Exodus, because Tanis is actually the biblical city of Zoan.
Now, wait. Tanis and Zoan do not sound remotely alike to the average listener. Walk us through how we know they are the exact same place.
Well, it comes down to an unbroken linguistic chain that has survived for over 3,000 years.
Okay.
The ancient Egyptian name for the city was Janet. When Hebrew writers interacted with it, that word was transliterated as Zoan, which we read in English as Zoan.
Ah, I see.
Then when the Greeks arrived centuries later, they struggled to pronounce the Egyptian J sound, so they rendered it as Tanis.
Okay.
And today, the modern Arabic village sitting on those exact ruins in the Delta is called San El Hagar. So Janet, Zoan, Tanis, San, it's the exact same word, preserved in the mouths of the locals across millennia.
That is amazing. Okay, so the linguistic chain proves Tanis is Zoan. But why does that location fundamentally change how we read the biblical timeline? Because Zoan is famous for something completely different than Solomon's era.
It changes everything because of the mystery of the monuments. When archaeologists originally excavated Tanis, they found massive obelisks, towering colossi, and these intricate temple blocks. But there was a glaring problem.
Which was?
None of these massive stone monuments originally belonged there.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Further excavations prove that the 21st dynasty, Siamun's dynasty, literally built Tanis out of recycled parts. They physically tore down the abandoned city of Pi-Ramesses, loaded these multi-ton stones onto barges, and hauled them miles away to construct Tanis.
Let that sink in for a second. Pi-Ramesses is the biblical Ramses. It is the literal city where the Israelites were enslaved, the city of the Exodus.
Exactly. And because the physical stones of the Exodus city were moved to Tanis, the scriptural memory moved right along with them. The Masoretic text, the authoritative Hebrew text of the Jewish Bible, wasn't just casually naming a city when it mentioned Zoan.
The writers knew exactly what had happened.
Yes. In Psalm 78, when recounting the plagues of Egypt and the showdown between Moses and Pharaoh, the text explicitly says, God did these wonders in the field of Zoan.
Wait, so the psalmist is accurately capturing the architectural recycling of the region. They are effectively saying, you know, those plagues. They happened right where those massive stones in Zoan originally came from.
Precisely. And it's not an isolated reference. The Book of Numbers connects Zoan's timeline to the ancient city of Hebron. The biblical writers are actually using a very specific Egyptian regional idiom.
Which idiom?
Ancient Egyptian texts referred to the hinterland around the city as the Sekdant, meaning the field of Janet. The Hebrew writers translated that concept literally into the field of Zoan. They knew exactly where the physical stage of the Exodus had been relocated.
That is just, I want you to picture the stage set here. The very stones, the massive columns and obelisks that witnessed Moses demanding, let my people go, were hauled across the mud of the Delta to build Tanis.
Right.
And centuries later, walking among those exact same recycled stones, Pharaoh Siamun decides to send his daughter up to Jerusalem. And a generation after that, Jeroboam paces among those same stones, funded by Egyptian gold, plotting the civil war that would tear Israel apart. I mean, the physical background of the Exodus was literally dismantled and rebuilt to serve as the war room for a proxy war against Solomon's kingdom.
It is a profound historical layering.
Yeah.
It forces us to see how deeply interconnected these ancient narratives truly are. You know, geography isn't just a backdrop, it is an active participant in the history.
So true.
Actions taken in one generation like Siamun's unprecedented marriage alliance ripple outward, creating the vulnerabilities that Shishak exploits in the next. The ancient world was every bit as complex, dynamic, and strategically ruthless as our own.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive talking about how history isn't just a static diorama. Think about the corridor we've been traveling today. Around 970 BC, an Egyptian pharaoh's daughter packs her royal entourage and travels north, out of the Delta, to marry into the House of David in Jerusalem, right when that kingdom was at the absolute zenith of its power.
A kingdom that her own ancestors had watched escape from slavery, now standing as a massive regional superpower.
Exactly. But skip forward a few centuries to 586 BC. Jerusalem is completely destroyed by the Babylonians. The monarchy is wiped out. And the last free royal daughters of the House of David, King Zedekiah's daughters, are forced to flee their burning city as refugees.
And where do they go?
They flee south, back across the desert into the Egyptian Delta. They make the exact reverse of the journey the Pharaoh's daughter took centuries before.
Seeking asylum in the very region that had once manipulated, harbored, and waged proxy wars against their ancestors.
And they end up at an Egyptian frontier fortress city called Tanis. Now fast forward over 2,000 years. When British archaeologists finally found the ruins of this site in the 1880s, the local Arabs still had a name for it. They didn't call it Tanis.
What do they call it?
They called the ruins Qasr bint al-Yahudi, the castle of the Jew's daughter. Across 2 millennia, the local memory held onto the ghosts of those refugee princesses from Jerusalem. I invite you to go dig into the ruins of Tanis on your own, because if there is one thing this deep dive proves, it's that history doesn't just repeat itself, it echoes.